I'm Arbrella Luvert. I identify as African American. I've been here in Eugene for over 30-some years, and I'm recently retired as 32 years in education. And I am excited to be a part of the Peace Conference, just so that you know that. I do work with students, I work with the community, and it's really a pleasure to be here. Our goals for today, you're in the right session if you're here to do the Undoing Racism and Privilege workshop, okay? Our goals are going to be to have a dialogue about race. I don't think we have enough conversations going on. And then after we finish a little bit of dialoguing and getting to get more acquainted with each other, we want to leave you with some skills so you hear some things and maybe kind of equip you with responding to that. And we're going to also talk about white privilege a little bit.
Do we want to model the introductions that we're getting into?
Yes.
Would you like to start with yours?
Okay.
And then mine?
One of the things on the yellow sheet that you see under introductions is to describe an encounter with racism. And do you view yourself as privileged to begin with? And then explain why or why not. My first encounter with racism happened when I was basically in elementary school. My mother had me sit down and my dad with another group of people in the house and write to the Attorney General, making a request that they honor the laws regarding integrating the schools. So my first encounter came on the table side of seeing people organize, as the speaker said this morning, get the strategies. I was very present with people doing strategies to integrate the schools. And I went to K-12. Segregated schools, all black teachers, totally had a ball. In my eyesight as a child, the world was fine. But my parents knew what was actually going on, considering we lived in a segregated community and they wanted more from that. And do I consider myself privileged? I consider myself to be privileged in the sense that I have choice to decide where I want to live, because during that time we could not.
I'm Beth Aydelott, and you'll notice I always like to point this out. We've got our email addresses up here. You'll notice they both end with edu. We're both educators here. We're both pretty active in the community too, talking about privilege and racism. So I self-identify as European American. I'm white. I go around the city saying, hey, I'm white. And there's a certain responsibility that comes with being white in a multicultural society. And we're going to get into this because it's difficult. It's difficult. And it's something that we all need to work with. So in terms of the introductions that pretty soon we're going to ask you to introduce yourselves to each other here. My first encounter with racism was, I can't even remember. I grew up always knowing I was privileged. Privileged because I'm white. I grew up in Tennessee, Mississippi, and I always knew there was a difference between the way I was treated and the way my African-American friends were treated. I also raised two girls in Memphis, Tennessee. So it's difficult. It's very difficult raising children in a racist society, basically. When I came to Eugene, I guess my shock and horror was when people said, aren't you glad to be out of the South in Eugene where there's no racism? Yeah, it's kind of funny, isn't it? If it wasn't so tragic. You know, you either laugh or you cry. It's something like that. I do consider myself as privileged in terms of skin color. I am a woman, and the women here will understand that that's a part where we are a little bit underneath and still working on that. So right now, do you want to have them?
We want you to do some introductions too. We think it's really important that you identify yourself ethnically, okay, and share that with how you want to be identified. So if you stand up on your feet real quickly, and then I want you to turn around to the person, or it's 8 of us, so that worked really well.
This works really well.
And I want you to describe the first time you encountered racism. And I also want you to answer the question whether or not you feel privileged. So pair up real quickly, and I want you to spend a minute or two talking about that as you introduce yourself. So do that now, please.
I'm John.
What I'd like for you to do is to finish that thought, if you would, please. Finish your thought. And then I'd like for you to sit with the person you just had that conversation with.
If you look at your agenda, we apologize for cutting you off because this is sometimes one of the most fruitful things to start. We just want to get some introductions in here. If you look at the agenda, the next thing is the agreements. This is not a lecture, have you noticed? This is an interactive, this is a dialogue, because we all have to work on this together. But we spelled out some agreements here, just 3 short bullet points, just to make sure that this is a room of safety for us. So that the first one is to speak for yourself and not others. We cannot truly understand another person's experiences. Share airtime. Y'all are all talkers, I know that for a fact. I heard that, which is fantastic. But it means we really don't have much time. We were allotted only an hour and a half, and now we have less than that. So we really need to make the point and then get on and make sure that everybody who has something to say gets to be able to say it. And then this one is probably the most important. Those of you who've been in some study circles or some other workshops like this, there has to be a way to indicate without offending somebody, ouch, that hurt. You know, we are going to talk about unintentional offenses that we all make from time to time, but we need to allow each other to say, you know, ouch, at this point, and then say, that offended me because. Okay, can we all agree to this? Okay, fantastic. Now, we've given you these handouts. If you look at one of the white ones that says definitions around oppression and privilege, we want to get some terms set. We could spend the entire rest of this just wrestling over the meanings of words, and we don't want to. So what we've done is given you kind of a good sense of what Arbrella and I are talking about, what we mean, working definitions here. I'm going to go over them kind of quickly here. The white sheet is talking about oppression, and I'm not going to read all of them, but just want to touch on them. Oppression, the systematic mistreatment of a group of people by the society. Internalized oppression is even more insidious. It's when the group that's oppressed takes it inside, and they believe the messages that they receive. That's when it gets really dangerous. Transferred oppression is when you have prejudicial actions towards someone in your own group. So you see, we're kind of going down into the depths here of all the dangers of oppression when you have any kind of discrimination here. Stereotyping, of course, generalizing in an oversimplified way. This is a logical fallacy. Any of you who've taken rhetoric, composition, anything like that, hasty generalization. I know, I'm a Southerner, I'll do that. John, you'll forgive me. We know that Southerners are lazy, because I know some lazy Southerners, and you probably do too. So obviously John and I must be lazy too. I apologize to any other Southerner. Okay, I didn't hear any ouches though, so I think you're okay. You're used to it if you're Southerner, aren't you? The stereotype threat, which is another kind of internalization thing. I'm a woman, and so sometimes I'm more hesitant to ask for help. Especially from my male colleagues, because I don't want to play into the stereotype. And it becomes almost a burden there. Okay, so we're kind of going fast here, but you understand kind of what we're talking about. Racism, we're going to get into that more with the pink sheet. Institutional racism, of course, is just like oppression. It's when it's systematic, it's not individual anymore. And that's what we've got in this country. We're not alone. We're not the only country, of course, but we've got that. What I want to get to is the racial microaggressions, and we'll talk about this later too. These are the unintentional, everyday discrimination, acts of discrimination that I'm sorry we white folks are very guilty of. Everybody does it, but we don't recognize them. And I'm assuming that's one reason you're here at this workshop. It's a thing of becoming aware and then figuring out what to do about it. It's a two-step process, becoming aware of the situation and then what do we do about it. So, Arbrella, do you want to talk about the pink sheet?
Take the pink sheet, if you will. One thing we want to put on the table now, that race is a false classification of people. There is a whole volume of work that talks about this in terms of the literature, and that is a political construction. So you need to know, as you were introducing yourself, and I was trying to hear this, and someone mentioned that they checked the human race box or something to that effect. I was kind of listening in a little bit. You need to understand, it's pretty well tracked that we all came from Africa, pretty much. We're from the motherland, so we're more alike. But there are some things we need to understand, that because it is a political construction, what the impact has been upon each and every one of us. If you turn the page, one of the impacts is structural racism. And when you encounter these words, basically we're saying the definition is that it's a system of advantage for white people. How many of you would agree with that? And I see most hands in the air. It's the systemic oppression of people of color. And it's a belief in the supremacy of white people and the institutional power to enforce that belief. Key word, if you were to underline it, would be what? White people, and what makes it work? What makes the system sustain itself? Oppression and the power that the people who have to oppress. Structural racism occurs when a group with the ability to enforce its prejudices does this through the laws, through practices, through policies, or cultural norms, or expectation that give greater weight to one's group view of the world over another. And this is the impact of structural racism, and we heard about this morning, the poverty, the inadequate health care, substandard jobs, imprisonment, and other conditions. And if we had time, we could actually do the data analysis on each one of these and share exactly how does that play out in schools, how does that play out on your jobs, how does that play out in our community. So, one other thing. This morning you heard the speaker talk about crisis, and he talked about the environmental crisis, and he also talked about war. And what we're going to throw in there is another justice, racial justice, as being a crisis also. It is the proactive reinforcement of policies, practices, and attitudes, and action, key word, action, that produce equitable power, equitable access, equitable opportunities, equitable treatment, equitable impact and outcome for all. And this is the distinguishing part we want to make. Racial diversity versus racial justice. Racial diversity means you can just have more people that look like me around and think that all is well. Okay, and that could be an illusion all by itself. Racial justice is not the same as racial diversity. It requires an analysis and strategy for addressing racism in our institutions. And you can read the rest. And so that we want to put on the table. How many of you agree with that? Can I see your hands? Okay.
If you turn to the last page here, you see another keyword here that we brought up before, but we need to talk about what we mean by privilege. Privilege is something that you don't earn, that's given to you by birth. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. It's something that you're given just by being born white. We have a privilege that people of color do not have. We didn't ask for it. It's definitely not our fault. We're not here to talk about white guilt. I tell people I have enough white guilt for everybody, I think, in the whole city of Eugene, so please, no more, no more. Guilt doesn't do anything anyway. It's white responsibility. It's the awareness of it. We didn't ask for it, and you know what? We can't give it away. I can't say, don't treat me like a white woman. I can't. Our society is not capable of that. I mean, I am what I am. It's the privilege of, I can walk out of a store and the alarm goes off, and what do you think the response is of the clerks in the store?
You're okay, go ahead.
Oh, and even more, they apologize to me. They apologize.
Sorry about that.
Oh, we're so sorry, because they're afraid I'll never come back. Did you see how absurd that is? Only recently I've heard that Crayola crayons has stopped calling that peach color flesh, What does this do? It's just this assumption. And we white folks don't notice because it's just normal to think that flesh-colored Band-Aids will match our skin, more or less. To notice that if I teach at Northwest Christian University, and if I teach particularly good one day, my students don't say, "Oh, really good for a white woman," you know?
Versus if I came in and I'm the principal and there's an emergency with a student, but yet everybody will go to someone who doesn't look like me and assume they are the principal.
It's that assumption. It's that assumption. And if I teach a horrible class, people don't say, "Oh, well, what do you expect? She's white." I get to be treated as an individual. I have that luxury. Arbrella doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't. And you don't either.
You don't either.
And you don't either. So you know exactly what we're talking about here. But you see, I am so used to be treating as if I perform well, it's because of me and I get the credit.
Whereas if I'm promoted, it is definitely because of who I know, not because I have 32 years of qualifications to back up.
Or if it's affirmative action.
Oh.
That's what they say too. She doesn't really deserve it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I should get that job.
Yeah. And people ask that question of me, but it's only because of gender. You know. But that's the only thing. It makes life simpler. It makes life simpler. It's like you get a free ticket in this. And so that's what we're talking about here. It's not a personal characteristic. It's not our fault. We didn't ask for it. And it's just we need to use it because I have a power that Arbrella doesn't have. So it's my responsibility to use it because it's for both of our benefits. It's the kind of world that we both want to live in.
But we all have responsibility to impact the system, to shift it so that there is equity and we begin to move those assumptions to another level or examine ourselves with assumptions and to say who's at the table, who's not at the table, why not, what's really going on. Oh, that's where we're going.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
That's where
Yes.
we're going.
Well, yeah, and that's why I said this is kind of like a two-part thing. First is to become aware of it.
Exactly.
And you are probably much more aware of it than people like me. And then the thing is, okay, so now what do we do? And actually we're getting into that right here,
Yeah.
and we're actually
Right.
almost on time.
Yeah, what we're going to do, one of the things you asked, how do we do that? Okay, and that is a good question. How many of you are familiar with this type of work? Can I see your hands? Okay, you do this work. Okay, good. The question on the table was how. So that means that you have, evidently, well, you answer that. Can I have an answer? How would you shift it? Anybody have a response to that?
You might shift it just by speaking up, by saying, look here, look who's on this committee.
Exactly. And we're going to talk about some speak up examples. Very good. Yeah. And there are others. What we want to do now is to get more into the assumptions. Why is it that people assume? Because I know at times I make an assumption too. So what I want to do, we have what we call Joan Olson. She wrote Detour Spotting for White Anti-Racists. Because the more that we can spot it, we can speak to it. And that's a skill all by itself. So we know we only have like an hour and a half, but we want you to be able to recognize assumptions and then be able to address them in some way or format. So what we want to do, when you came in, we had you count from 1 to 4 pretty much in a group. So where are my ones? Would you stand out real quick? Who's the one? Okay, ones, can you group yourself? Twos, can you group yourself? So one's over here.
Just arbitrarily so.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter.
It's
you can
fine.
just-
And just
Yeah.
wait for a second, and then we'll see. who
John, we
needs
want to
it.
give you this real quick. Okay, twos, can you take this spot up here? All right, so if you didn't get a number, anybody did not get a number, who are my twos? Okay, you guys are going to have fun with this, okay? And threes, okay, you want to group, and then you'll make a fours, all right? We'll do that. What we've just given you really are 23 examples of what we call assumptions that people will make. So I want you to pull card number 1, and somebody read it to me. What's the title of that card? I'm colorblind. One assumption is, what do people mean when they use that? Okay, so we're going to have you literally read the card, look at the reality check that goes through with that, and then reflect on what does that mean to you if you were a person of color, and what does that mean to you if you are white? Then I want you to pull card 3. You'll do the same thing, 21, 23. And we're only going to give you like so many minutes to reflect on them. And then we're going to come back as a group and talk about these assumptions. Okay?
Aren't these wonderful? I don't think you came across anything that was new, but you might have come across some new insights. Is there anything you want to share with the group? Anything that came up that was particularly interesting in the groups that you want to talk about? And then there's silence, right?
10 seconds.
I chose these 4 because I was just going through them and I was trying to find the ones that really struck a chord with me. It was really hard to choose it to 4. Let me just say, if this came to your mind, the first one on colorblind. The person who says, and you've all heard people say, well, I'm colorblind, I don't say that. I can say to Brilla, for instance, and I can say, I respect you, I like being with you, and to me, I don't see your skin color. You are just the same as my other friends, and I can mean that with all respect. But so my intention is to tell her that I respect her.
And I'm going to go, I want you to recognize all of me. All of me is to recognize that I am African American. I am black. And when you saw me, when you came in the room, what did you say? I'm African American, whether you said it or not. It's obvious. So, and we do that with kids a lot, who may be the only one in the classroom. Totally neutralize them, and you've just normed them as being white.
Because what I'm basically saying is I see her as white. And I am completely denying a whole part of her. But the people who say that, the intention is good.
Yeah, the intention is good, but on the other hand, it's just saying, I disregard your identity.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
It's only my identity. It's dismissing your identity.
Exactly.
It's denial.
Of course. And even though I say it thinking I'm respecting her, am I really?
No.
You're absolutely right. Because I'm, yes. Uh-huh.
And I would say that you can't know the denial if you're so ignorant of history. If you're ignorant of current events and
Of course.
recent history and civil rights history and Civil War history and Reconstruction history, it's the whole history of our country is filled with racism.
Absolutely.
Of course. And it's very
The more informed you're about it, not so that you can feel guilty about it, but to acknowledge that as being a part of an African American's identity.
Exactly. And what has happened too with colorblind, a lot of people have gone that with their policies and use it to discriminate. That's actually what has happened on a system level.
It's very patronizing. It's my basically what I am telling her, and I don't even know it because it's ignorance, is I am saying I'm treating you as if you're white. So the assumption is white is the norm, and more so, it's the better place to be.
I'm going to add your Native American history in what you were saying.
Oh, yes, please.
Oftentimes we do, as a form of denial, just say, oh, we're ignorant of American history, and that thereby canceling out Native American people who were the First Nations people who've been here for thousands of years.
Exactly.
So whenever we make them invisible, we hurt them.
Exactly.
It's the invisibility of it. Thank you so much. That's the point that we need to realize in this. Yes.
And I think the hardest thing for us, people of color, is like when the whites say that, it's like saying, "Come on, ride with me on the same, in the same car." And I feel like you just went farther. It's like saying, "Oh, you're okay, and you're just the same." It's just you already were so oblivious of her identity. You disregarded her identity, and you are pushing farther by saying, "You're just like me." Like,
You're right. You're right.
please, no, I'm not. I'm African American. But
You just strip me of my culture and everything else, my
Yeah.
values and my belief.
It's a disrespect, not a respect.
Exactly.
It really is a disrespect.
Exactly. And that's where the awareness needs to come in, the education has
So
to.
I have a question in line with that. Like, for example, here, we don't even go further outside. Right here in LCC, I'm a student here. I do this all the time. I'm like,
Oh, I'm sure.
and I meet with teachers. It's like, I'm often like, invisible. Like, sometimes I feel like it's no use speaking up, and you're being dismissed because, did you understand what I said? Well, I have an accent, but I understood enough English, I guess, or did you understand my English? Because it's always being dismissed, like, I wish there are other people of my color in this room. It's like, nobody understands me. It's like, am I the one crazy?
How many of
How do
you
do that?
identify with what she is saying? How many of you understand what she is saying about feeling like, you just didn't hear me? Can I see your hand so you can look around and see how many people know exactly what you're saying? Or I've had. So,
And
keep speaking up.
And the teacher, if we brought the teacher in here, and I'm sure it has been more than one, if you brought the teacher in here and we put the teacher, male or female, here and said, did you mean to dismiss her? The teacher would probably say, no, I was meaning to help. I was making sure that she understood. And, it's that unintentional, always, that's almost worse than if you have an outright, racial bigot here, because at least then you know what you're dealing with. But yes, it's that dismissal.
Not okay, though.
Not okay at all.
In my opinion, and in my experiences as an employee here of 10 years, and also someone who was born and raised in Eugene, Lane Community College is predominantly white. It's a predominantly white institution. That just doesn't mean that there's a small handful of us who work here. It also, for me, means our hiring practices and our choice of curriculum and our teaching techniques. I'm a faculty member in a classroom. And so all of those things kind of reflect a certain reality or mindset. And I wouldn't just say, it's extremely complicated, but I definitely wanted to tell the person that I had introduced myself to earlier, it's not something that you just, I wouldn't say it's your own burden to bear. I'd say it's something that a lot of us feel. And I would also say that if you ever have an opportunity to swing by my office or take a class with me, you absolutely won't feel like that.
European American instructors need to be taught. There needs to be an education process.
And it's on multiple levels.
To
Because you can go through graduate school and you're not going to get something like this. That's required. So you're walking around with your advanced degrees, and you'll have like massive gaps in your
Well,
knowledge.
I'm at Northwest Christian, and we have to teach our instructors, because they're all white instructors, how to teach in a multicultural classroom. Because it's something that white people have to learn. And that's what I'm saying. It's just, it's not okay.
I read an article and I was surprised. I was new in the States. How educational institutions go out of their way to help white people succeed. And then I look at the statistics. Wow, this really proves it. And then I came into Lane and like, wow, I'm going through with that. I'm observing that. I'm like, wow, because I could see instructors who will go out of their way to hunt down students who are failing, when in fact some people who are even doing well and want to clarify if they're learning. It's like being pushed away. Excuse me, I have no time. You have no time for me, but you are chasing for that person because that person is white.
So what I think you're saying is that the institution is set up not for the success of people of color. That there's always this feeling that you're always struggling, and then as if it's this type of thing up and down going on all the time. And that's where we go with what kind of skills do we need to transform the system? And how do we name that? We name it as being institutional racism. But if you never name it, and as the speaker was saying today, how do you remove those pillars? Or what is the strategy that we should come up with to dismantle institutional racism? We want to take you there, okay? Yeah. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Just so I see where you are. Yeah. We've named it. That's exactly what you're feeling. And the policies, the classroom, the climate.
I just want to go to one more of these, and then we're going to have to go on. But the thing is, I think the last one, was that the one where the saying sorry?
23.
Yeah, is that the one? That's the one that really, really, really resonates with me, because I can look at you and say, I am so sorry that you have to go through with that, because I am, and I mean it. And I think you know that I genuinely am sorry you're having to go through with this. But I have to do something else, don't I? Is it enough for me to just say, I'm sorry? It's so. What do you think about that? Because that's where the becoming an ally. That's where what can we do?
It's like hitting a person on the road and get out of our car and say, I'm sorry, and the person is bleeding, and we leave that person on the road.
Exactly.
And we just, I'm sorry, I have to go to work. You're bleeding, I'm so sorry. We don't even call 911 or call the police and just let the person die. Just like that.
Or, for example, in Nazi Germany, a German person saying, oh, I'm sorry to the Jewish family who's being carted off to be extinguished, and not do anything, seeing a person being sent off to die.
I think you put it in that it's
Actions speak louder than words.
yes, yes. So I can turn to Arbrella because my ancestors owned slaves, and I can tell her very genuinely, I am sorry for what my ancestors did, and I think you believe me. But does it help her?
Not if my family members are unemployed. Not if they can't live anywhere they want to live in America. So the realities and the experience become, I hear you, but the impact of system is sending me an entirely different message. And that's what we need to counteract. Okay?
And that's where we go.
Yeah.
Because I am still benefiting from the system, even though I'm
Right.
sorry.
Right.
And she is still disadvantaged. If you will look at the white sheet, adversary and the ally path, we're not going to go through these. We're bringing you lots of stuff to take home.
Yes.
I want you to look very carefully when you get home at the adversary path. We usually think of adversary, it's basically, the old cliche, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. That's kind of at work here. And if you're not an ally, you're an adversary. We usually think of adversaries as people who are actively discriminating, yelling words, doing things. But if you will look at these, it's more the passive people who don't do anything,
Passive racism.
who watch it and know it's happening. And I'm so sorry my school discriminates against people of color. But if I don't do anything, then I'm an adversary. And we believe this very, very strongly. If I don't do part of this institutional racism that I see and I acknowledge, then I'm an adversary to my friend Arbrella here. And we want to be allies, all of us working together. People of color cannot do it themselves. White people have to speak up because our voices are louder. Our voices are heard. They cannot do it by themselves. We have the responsibility. If we do not like what's going on, then we have to do something.
I want to add to that, as a person of color, institutional racism has hurt me and my family as well. And oftentimes it's really difficult to speak up and really be heard because there's this microaggression, this micro-racism, and I feel invalidated by my complaint or issue.
Oh, because was that one of the ones that's when in there, people of color are just too sensitive. You can't take a joke.
That's an assumption.
It's that assumption. It's just like, I didn't mean anything by it. Why did you take it that way? I was just,
However, if my white colleague could speak up, it would be totally
Exactly. And in meetings, to stick up, to support, to have it be heard, not necessarily to agree with the person, because that can be discriminatory too, just because they're of color, but to support,
Right.
to make sure that everybody is heard.
Right, and there's a way to do it. The NAACP was actually founded by multiracial groups, and because they were lynching all the black people during that time during the country. But at the same time, over the legacy of that time, has gone from people who were white to multiracial And it is actually, it was a group of multiracial people who did that. So we have a lot to share. So we want to move you to the next activity too in just a sec. When Beth finished that, there's a,
Yeah, why don't we go ahead to the speak up? Because
Yeah.
I keep hearing speak up. being
we
said
hear it too.
again
There's
and
another
again.
activity.
That's something that we can
Yes.
do, that we all can do.
Yeah. One of the things you could tell this is a 5-day deal. We're trying to squeeze all of it down in 10 minutes. But speaking up is huge, because what if you notice that something is going on? How comfortable are you with lifting your voice, no matter who you are? People of color, non-people of color, it doesn't matter. How well do you do that? Now, I want you to see this. The numbers around the wall are like 1 through 5. 5 is like, I am comfortable, I will stand up, I will speak to that issue, okay? And then 1 is, I need a little more before I can go there, okay? And so I'm gonna give you a scenario, and I want you to respond to how well you think you will be able to address that. This is a real one. What I have in my hand is a covenant, okay, that is dated 1988. I just refinanced my house, and my realtor knew about these covenants. How many of you know what covenants are? Okay, this is one that is for Kenny Oakway Park, Lane County, dated 1988. How many of you were in Eugene during 1988? Okay, all right. I'm going to give you the example, and then I want you to move around to one of those numbers to tell me how you would respond, or you feel comfortable, where your comfort zone is. So, number 1, the covenant says no residence shall be constructed on the property with a gross cost of less than $4,000. But where I want to get to is the one that reads 3. The property shall not be sold, cannot be transferred, cannot be leased, cannot be occupied by anyone other than a member of the Caucasian race. I'd like for you to place yourself where you would feel comfortable in terms
Like
of
speaking up
responding.
against this.
Could you speak up?
Could you speak
Could
up?
you speak
if you
up?
saw this,
If
could
your realtor just happened to pull
5
that
is
out.
very comfortable.
5, I am there. I don't have any doubts about this. I can speak up. Oh, that was an easy one? Yeah.
Let's talk, how appalled are we?
Yeah. I think I love the group. That means you would have allowed me to live in that Oakway area. But the reality is, and you and I both know this, there are places in Eugene right now where there are pockets of race. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Where do you see it? Tell me where you see it. Speak to it. What would you do? Okay, your realtor gave you this. You're very comfortable. How would you speak up? Anybody?
I would say that I don't need to live there either then. I mean, if there's an area that you're going to just subject people because of the color of their skin, I don't need to live there. You know, I would choose somewhere else to live. I think that would be a good way. Being white, I mean, it would be like, oh, well, now white people aren't going to live here either because I think that would be maybe something that would make them take a second look at it. I don't know if it's something I could do.
Okay. Thank you.
I would point out that it's against the law what
Yeah,
they're
true.
doing.
1988.
That's totally against the law. I mean,
Totally
that's where I
is.
start.
So you would say, hey,
Yeah.
what planet are you from? This
Yeah,
is illegal.
well, and I'm going to report you. You know,
Yeah,
I'm
that too.
going to report you.
I'm going to report you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would. One of the things that I would want to do. I mean, I'm a musician, so I would actually want to write a song about it and go to different communities and use the name actually of the realtor that was doing that. But I'd also want something visual. I'd want, to do a direct action where I put posters. We got a group of people in the neighborhoods to put posters up with the name of that realtor, do it at night or whatever, so that the neighborhood was aware that this is going on and that it's a policy.
Very good. Yes.
I think I'll find out the same people of my color that I'll recruit them and we'll just say, hey, let's get those houses there. If we all could afford money-wise, income-wise, let's apply and just 10, 20 people really get into that, even if they are not really, and pressure that realtor and go to the same realtor. Look how much, and I will say, hey, look, I just heard someone wants also to buy the house and the house. And just think how much commission you'll get. And then find out the background investigation, because some realtor will say, oh, it's a closed sale already. I just found out somebody. And to tell you the truth, nothing really happened in that few days or overnight transaction. It's just like, oh, you are black or you are not white. We don't want you in that neighborhood. Find out and say,
Find out.
I have the same right as they do.
Absolutely. Yes. There was a comment behind it. Yes.
We purchased our first home in 2004, and there's the huge stack of paperwork that you end up signing, and there was wording that talked about how this company that we were with refuses to discriminate on the basis of blah 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 blah, all the nice wording that should be existing, and we stopped the entire process and said we like this and we want to acknowledge this, that this is here because of this past. And so I'm thinking in that type of situation, you'd be right in the middle of signing the big stack and just stop the whole process and say this needs to be removed.
Absolutely.
Because really,
Absolutely.
talking about legalese.
Yeah, absolutely. How many of you know, oh, there's one more, yes.
Oh, and I was just gonna say, I put myself at 4 because I would want to speak out in all these ways, but I don't know if I would really be that, willing to interrupt the process when you're signing this, 8-hour-long thing. But once again, speaking up and pointing it out, like everyone said, that's not right. That's
Absolutely, yes.
And I would find out which housing authority I could contact. Write a letter. I'd write a letter to them and to the realtor, the agency, to let them know what my thoughts and feelings are. In addition to, I believe I would contact the Human Rights Commission, because that is a human rights violation.
Very good, very good, very good, very good. Yeah, thank you for standing. I noticed the group didn't move. Talk to me. So you're very comfortable with addressing issues.
I think I'll move to 4.
No,
No, stay where you
are.
Stay where you feel.
Yeah. Share with me.
I'm assuming that it was me, being light-skinned
The skin that you're in.
and having grown up, basically middle class and light-skinned, and having some more mobility, within the culture than other people. And I tend to be the one that can't keep her mouth shut about things. So, and if I were darker skinned, if I had less economic opportunity, I might choose something else, because the risk factor would be higher for me. But I feel like it's also a responsibility of my privilege to be, the person to speak up.
More comment?
Well, I mean, I do have privilege as a senior, quote unquote, senior faculty member, or someone with tenure. Actually, as depressing as it seems, the second most senior Latino faculty member on this campus, and I've only been here 10 years. But I found out early in my career that it didn't matter if I were to cut my hair or put on a tie or whatever. I mean, I'm always going to be, that reverse racist, that angry minority, that, whatever. And since it takes so little effort to be considered the militant on the campus, it really, I don't feel, why not just speak out?
Oh, so you're used to it. You're used to being the troublemaker.
It's just comes with the territory, I guess. But I would give advice to maybe students or junior faculty or whatever to pick and choose your battles as wisely as you can, because the stakes are very high sometimes.
I guess I would be moved by whether I would be hurting the individual who was said to. Am I making it harder for that person?
Good.
That's why I moved, because I wasn't sure. The last thing you want to do is jeopardize the
And of course-
person you're advocating for. Again, a case of good intention maybe having a bad outcome.
For
But-
whom?
Well, I'm saying that's what I'm questioning.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm such a rabble rouser. I have no problem speaking up about anything, but I would want to consider that as well. That's why it's a little difficult. I want to know more about the situation to make sure I didn't just speak out of the wrong intention again, or cause something to befall the person.
Okay,
just because I wanted to speak up.
thank you. Yes.
Real quick. I just want to say, I would find a way to communicate how that was painful and hurtful. I would find a way to diplomatically, but definitely address the issue, because it is something, as somebody who likes to teach, and I've been at the end of that as well, I understand. Yes, I'd find a way to communicate as a teachable moment. I would take that on.
Okay, one more comment?
I was just going to say, as I moved out here, I've found that more of the Latinos out here are from Mexico, but just when you were saying that comment, I'm from a small town in Maryland, and I worked at this restaurant, and a lot of Latinos worked in the kitchen, which is a whole different thing in itself about how that worked. But I've seen, a Latino be in the bathroom, and the one incident where it happened, it was a friend of mine, and this Caucasian person was like, "Oh, this damn Mexican, get out of the bathroom," and I was like, he's not Mexican, he's from El Salvador. But I see that happen a lot, and so I didn't have any problem saying that, and then the person that said that just stepped back and didn't have anything to say and was just like silented. So it does have an impact, and I would say in that aspect it helps to know your colleagues and where they are really from, because I see that happen a lot. Just because you're a Latino, you're Mexican, and I think that kind of takes away from their culture a lot, because it doesn't mean that they are. And I don't know that situation, he might have been from Mexico, but that's just what I was thinking when you said that.
Thank you. We're gonna go right ahead, do one more. I see you got it. Okay, go.
Yeah,
Go.
just, having some time to think, I might try to do this on an institutional level. And, go to human resources and talk about the need for sensitivity training and diversity training, and work on it from that angle, so that, who knows the details.
Yeah, obviously something is wrong when a supervisor feels that comfortable
Right.
to make a comment like that to a person of color. That is a problem. And it definitely deserves action on someone to speak up in that regards. I think they're giving me the 5 minutes, so can we take real quick comment? Yes.
And I will speak to the management. I will write a memorandum to the management, whatever is even if I'm in the lower rank. And I will document, I'll make a time and motion study and review the output. I'll talk to the management about job evaluations. And I will say, if we have this percent of Mexicans, how is their job employment status and productivity? And I'll compare it with the productivity of the white. I'll say, let's stop and address it during the in-service meetings and say, let's stop these words, take this, take the language and avoid divisions, but get to the goal of productivity and efficiency and clarify, validate. Right on that moment, I say, wait, how do you feel when he said this? You're the boss, what did you feel when you said this? Don't go away. And it's make it like a learning experience. I'll keep following the supervisor again and again and again.
So you're using data.
I will.
Actually, using data will tell you a lot, because you can name it. It is what it is. It's not subjective. It is the reality. And we can use data and analysis to be one of those pillars to dismantle institutional racism with allies, I feel. Have a seat.
Before you sit, can I say one thing? One thing that Arbrella was going to mention that she didn't. How comfortable would you feel if your mother made a racist comment?
Oh, yeah.
Just real quickly. Okay, then you're there. Okay, then come sit for a second, because we're talking, y'all have already answered some of your questions of what do you do. And the answer, speaking up, whether, and you have to decide on your mother, but it happens sometimes where it's not the institution, it's your family, because we're brought up like this. So we don't have time to look at the ally path, but there are things we can do. If you look at this, a lot of it is learning. Interrupting offensive jokes. Reading books. Educate yourself. That's come again and again. Over there, where we have copies of the handouts, which you already have, we have a sign-up sheet for study circles.
Yeah.
Do you know what a study circle is?
How many of you have done them? Is that curious?
I know that
Only 2.
study circles are small groups of people, diverse groups of people who get together to discuss these issues. Usually they're 2 hours long. It takes about 6 weeks to get to feel safe, to get to feel comfortable, to trust each other. I just finished one with Arbrella's husband at eWeb. Absolutely fantastic. We had 5 white managers of eWeb and 5 people of color. And Henry and I were the facilitators. Absolutely lots of dialogue. We
It
learned
works.
lots. It does work. There's a sign-up sheet if you're interested in being contacted about participating in something they're going on around the city. You're already doing something. You're going to the Peace Conference. Making yourself aware of these things. We were talking about it's preaching to the choir, but it's an ongoing struggle. You don't get a label saying, hey, I'm not racist anymore. There's not racism 101. And then, hey, I took a training, I'm fine. Yes. Uh-huh.
I did the study circle one time,
Yeah.
and I just want to say it's a real contribution to the community as well as to your life.
I agree.
It's very good.
There's always room to grow.
Yeah,
Oh,
there
very
is.
definitely.
There is. A couple other things I want to tell you before you leave, too. 10 ways to work against racism, and you've mentioned some of those. So pick the handout up. It may be over there on the side. The other thing I want to encourage you is to join organizations like the NAACP. It's not just for blacks only, okay? And this is
I'm a
not
member.
just a spiel, because you need to be with other allies. And I'm sure there's other organizations, too. Seek them out. And I say become an active ally. No action is passive, as far as I'm concerned, racism, in a system that is racist. So keep that in mind. I appreciate all of you. Think about the study circles. They do work.
And you have our email addresses.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Yeah.